I didn't scream when it happened. I didn't beg. I just sat there in that glass office while Martin Keller told me I was no longer aligned with company direction, all because I refused to let his influencer daughter turn our industrial security platform into her next viral vlog. They thought stripping my badge at 8:12 a.m. would end me. It didn't. It only activated something they never knew I built into AegisLink, something quietly waiting for the wrong person to cross me. Stay with me, and if this story hits you, subscribe and tell me what you think. I spent 8 years inside Stratagem Industrial Solutions building a system everyone depended on, but no one bothered to understand. AegisLink wasn't glamorous, and it definitely didn't make headlines, but it kept half the regional logistics grid from collapsing every time a storm hit the coast or a supplier cut corners. People like Martin Keller loved waving it around during investor meetings, calling it revolutionary and lean, but they never saw the nights I slept under my desk because a shipping corridor crashed at 2 a.m. or a load balancing unit glitched and threatened to shut down an entire warehouse network. I did that work quietly, without applause, without promises, and without complaining because I knew what failure meant for the workers on the ground. My job was to keep them safe. That was enough for me. Most days, at least. When I joined Stratagem, I thought I'd found a place where hard work still meant something, where people who actually built things mattered more than the ones who polished their smiles for quarterly reports. For years, I convinced myself that if I just stayed focused, kept my head down, and delivered results, the culture would eventually shift. It didn't. If anything, the arrogance grew thicker. There's a special kind of fatigue that settles in when you work under executives who think technology is a prop and people like me are replaceable parts. You learn to measure your victories in small moments. A system rerouted before a crash, a warehouse that avoided shutdown, a planner who thanked you quietly because AegisLink caught an error that would have cost her job. That was the world I cared about. The real one, the one far from boardrooms and glass walls. Outside of work, life wasn't any softer. My younger sister Daniela had been juggling 2 part-time jobs while managing our father's medical appointments ever since his stroke 18 months ago. I helped when I could, paid bills, drove him to physical therapy, cooked dinners on Sundays, but Stratagem consumed so much of me that guilt became a constant companion. Every overtime hour I put in for Martin and his ego was time stolen from my family, from the people who actually mattered. Still, I stayed. Not for the company, not for the paycheck, but because AegisLink mattered. It was mine in all the ways that counted, even if the board pretended otherwise. People joke that I had the Pro-D, systems architecture, in my bloodstream. They weren't wrong. I built its optimization engine, shaped its logic pathways, and laid down the protocols that kept it honest. I never said it out loud, but I always suspected someone would eventually try to take credit for it. That's how companies like Stratagem operate. They feed on the quiet ones, the builders, the backbone workers who think integrity will protect them. But I wasn't naive. Not anymore. The signs had been creeping in for months. Sloppy decisions from leadership, cost-cutting disguised as modernization, a sudden interest in turning the company into something flashy enough to attract a buyout. And then there was Tessa Keller, Martin's 22-year-old daughter with a ring light permanently attached to her hand. I didn't know her well, but I knew enough. She filmed everything, understood nothing, and had a talent for convincing her father that her massive social following made her an asset. I refused to believe they'd ever let her near AegisLink. I refused to believe they'd be that reckless. Turns out, I underestimated just how far incompetence can stretch when it's wrapped in power and last names. That was my mistake, the last one I made before everything changed. I walked into Stratagem that Tuesday morning expecting the usual pre-demo chaos. Last-minute checks, quiet panic, maybe a few executives pretending they understood the diagrams taped to the conference room walls. What I didn't expect was the message waiting for me on my phone at 7:58 a.m. Selena, COO's office, urgent. No explanation, just that clipped tone his assistant used when she didn't want to be caught in the blast radius. I took the elevator up, rehearsing possible issues in my head. Maybe a routing model needed updating. Maybe a client added new requirements. But the moment I stepped onto the executive floor, it felt wrong. too quiet. No one made eye contact. Even the air seemed stiff. Martin Keller's office door was cracked open, and I heard him pacing, muttering something about controlling the narrative and leveraging visibility. Those were investor words, not engineering ones. I knocked softly. He didn't look up. "Come in." His voice was flat, rehearsed. I stepped inside and immediately noticed two things. His tie was crooked, and he wasn't alone. Sitting cross-legged in one of the leather chairs, spinning gently side to side like this was a waiting room at a spa, was Tessa. She lifted her phone and gave me a bright, oblivious smile. "Hey, Selena, we're doing something super exciting today." The ring light on her tripod was already glowing. My stomach tightened. "Martin," I said slowly, "what's going on?" He finally stopped pacing and leaned both hands on his desk like he needed to steady himself. "We're pivoting the demo strategy," he announced, using that tone executives adopt when they've made up their mind and don't care who chokes on the fallout. "We want to show AegisLink as more than just a boring back-end tool. Clients want personality now, a story, humanity." "And that involves?" I asked, though dread was already pooling in my chest. Tessa bounced slightly. "Me. Daddy thinks my audience would love seeing how your system works, like a behind-the-scenes series, authentic, raw. You'll teach me the basics, and I'll explain it in a relatable way." She said relatable, like she was performing a magic trick. I stared at Martin. "You want me to train her on AegisLink's operational controls?" He nodded. "Today, before the demo, we'll have her record some footage inside the command hall, just a few light passes, nothing intrusive." Light passes, nothing intrusive. That's what people say right before they break something expensive. "Martin, AegisLink manages real-time industrial flow. One wrong input triggers reroutes across 3 states. This isn't content. This is infrastructure." He exhaled through his nose, slow, irritated, dismissive. "Selena, you need to stop being so precious about this system. We need modern appeal. Tessa gives us access to an entire demographic the company desperately needs. Investors want innovation." I felt heat rising up my neck. Not anger yet, just disbelief. "Let me see if I understand this correctly. You want to drag your daughter, who doesn't know the difference between a safety override and a playlist folder, into a room full of live operational controls, hours before a national-scale demonstration." His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "No," I said. "I'm protecting a system you clearly don't understand." Tessa rolled her eyes and whispered, just loud enough, "God, she's being dramatic." That did it. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not violently, quiet, controlled. The kind of break that comes from years of holding everything together while other people take credit, waste resources, and gamble with things you built with your own hands. "I'm not doing it," I said. "I won't train her, not today, not ever." The silence that followed wasn't silence. It was judgment, condemnation. Martin stood up straighter, eyes hardening into something cold and eager, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Selena Marquez," he said, reaching for the intercom. "Your refusal to adapt to changing business needs and follow direct leadership instructions is grounds for termination." My breath stalled. "Are you firing me?" "Effective immediately." His thumb pressed the button. "Security to my office. Escort protocol." Tessa actually gasped, delighted, not horrified. "Whoa, drama!" She even lifted her phone to record until Martin snapped, "Put that away." I didn't speak. I didn't fight. I just stood there, feeling my 8 years inside this company condense into a single, precise moment of clarity. He thought firing me was the end of it. He thought stripping my badge would erase the fact that AegisLink's core optimization engine, the one he bragged about to every client, every investor, every board member, was legally licensed from my private R&D LLC with employment conditions explicitly tied to system access. He thought this was power. Poor man. He had no idea what power really was. Nina and Harper arrived at the door, looking miserable. "Selena," Harper murmured. I nodded. Let's go. I walked out without another word, but not because I was defeated. I walked out because the moment Martin fired me at 8:12 a.m., he unknowingly flipped the first switch in a chain reaction he couldn't stop if he threw every lawyer in the state at me. My humiliation lasted 30 seconds. His would last a lifetime. Nina and Harper led me out of that office like they were escorting someone dangerous, though we all knew the only real threat in that hallway was the man still standing behind his mahogany desk, convinced he'd just won something. Their silence wasn't cold, it was protective. I could feel it in the way Harper subtly positioned herself between me and the executives craning their necks to watch. People always pretend they're not staring when someone's being dragged out of a company, but their eyes tell the truth. It's entertainment to them, a tiny taste of someone else's downfall to break up the monotony of their spreadsheet-filled morning. I'd seen it happen to others. I never thought it would happen to me. We stepped into the elevator, and Harper finally exhaled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Nina shook her head sharply. This is a mistake. He's panicking." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't waste energy comforting people who weren't the ones being shoved out. I kept my expression calm, almost serene, because somewhere beneath my humiliation was something far stronger and infinitely steadier, a rising certainty that Martin had just detonated a bomb under his own feet. When the elevator opened to the operations floor, I felt every pair of eyes snap toward us. Word travels fast in offices like ours. Faster than email, faster than policy changes. Bad news grows wings. I walked straight to my workspace, my steps measured, unhurried. Inside, everything looked the same as it had an hour earlier. My coffee still warm, the desk lamp still on, my notes spread out from where I'd been prepping for the demo. The normalcy of it all hit me harder than the firing itself. My whole life was still sitting there, unaware that I wouldn't be touching any of it again. I grabbed my personal things first, not because they were valuable, but because they were mine. Photos of my sister and dad at his first physical therapy appointment, the little ceramic owl my niece made in art class, the pen I stole from a hotel years ago because it wrote better than any office supply I'd ever used. I placed each item gently into the small cardboard box Harper handed me. Then came the moment I knew was coming. A sugary voice chimed from the doorway. "You're not allowed to take any company property." Tessa stood there, phone in hand, recording like she was capturing wildlife footage. "Dad said people try to sneak stuff out after they're fired." She tilted the camera, getting a better angle on my box. "Just following protocol." I didn't look at her. "Everything in this box is mine." She zoomed in anyway, a smirk curling in the corner of her mouth. "We just have to be sure." I straightened slowly, turned, and met her eyes with a calm so sharp it made her arm falter. "I built the system your father is gambling with today," I said quietly. "If anyone deserves to be worried about losing something, it's not me." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Neither Nina nor Harper said a word, but I felt their approval like a warm gust behind me. I closed the box, tucked it under my arm, and walked past Tessa without giving her another glance. She didn't follow. The hallway to the exit felt endless, like the company had stretched itself just to force me to take a longer walk of shame. But it wasn't shame tightening my chest anymore, it was anticipation. As soon as I stepped outside into the sunlight, I inhaled deeply, letting the cool air cut through the tension coiled under my ribs. Then I reached into my coat pocket and wrapped my fingers around the small, unremarkable metal key fob that held AegisLink's original licensing credentials. Everything the board ignored, everything Martin never bothered to understand. They thought they'd taken everything from me. They had no idea I was holding the one thing they could never afford to lose. I didn't even leave the parking lot. I set my box gently on the passenger seat, climbed into the driver's side, and shut the door. The silence inside my car felt different from the silence in Martin's office. His silence had been full of ego. Mine was full of calculation. I powered on my laptop, tethered my phone, and waited as AegisLink's encrypted portal blinked awake. Not through Stratagem's network, but through the private channels I'd built years ago, the ones no one bothered to ask about because they assumed I was just another engineer grateful to exist in their shadow. A simple prompt appeared on the screen. Marquez Innovations, Primary Architect Authentication. My hands didn't shake as I typed in the credentials. Why would they? I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't crashing anything, sabotaging anything, or breaking anything. I was simply allowing the system to follow rules that had always been there. Rules legally tied to my employment, rules they violated the moment Martin decided his daughter's content calendar mattered more than industrial stability. When the authentication cleared, a secondary window flashed open. Omega Layer Status. Disarmed. I hovered over the activation command for a moment, not to hesitate, just to acknowledge the weight of this moment, to understand that everything from this second forward would unfold exactly as it was designed to. Because the truth was simple. Omega Layer wasn't a bomb. It wasn't revenge. It was protection, a fail-safe, a system designed to freeze operations if the architect responsible for its logic was suddenly removed without a succession protocol. Companies love calling people assets until the moment they fire them. Then they pretend those assets never mattered. Omega Layer existed to remind them otherwise. I clicked once. The confirmation window appeared. Initiate Omega Layer? Lockdown countdown will begin immediately. I pressed yes. A timer blinked to life. 1 hour, 17 minutes. That was how long Stratagem had until the system politely, cleanly, and automatically shut its doors to everyone who wasn't me. I leaned back in my seat and watched numbers tick down, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Not satisfaction, not triumph. Just relief. Relief that for the first time in years, I wasn't the one carrying the burden alone. My phone buzzed. Leah. Something's happening with your access permissions. Did you get locked out? I typed back, not exactly. Watch the demo closely. A second buzz. Marcus. Selena, there are rumors. Did Keller actually fire you? I replied, he made a choice. Now the system will make one too. For a few minutes, I just sat there, watching the entrance to the building as people came and went, unaware of the collapse quietly knitting itself behind them. A man in a suit walked out laughing on his phone. A pair of junior analysts hurried through the revolving doors with iced coffees. Everything looked so normal. And yet, inside that building, Stratagem was 15 minutes away from seating its biggest clients in the command hall, an entire floor wired to display AegisLink's routing engine in real time. They would expect a smooth walkthrough. They would expect stability. They would expect the system to respond to their prompts, reroute simulated freight loads, and demonstrate flawless coordination across 3 states. Instead, at precisely 10:30 a.m., they were going to see something else. Architect credentials required, access denied, system lockdown imminent. My hands drifted toward the steering wheel as I imagined Martin's expression when the demo screens flickered. He would blame the tech team first, then the network, then the servers, then eventually he would have to face the truth that all the people he dismissed as interchangeable weren't interchangeable at all, that the backbone of his modernized vision was a person, not a prop. 30 minutes left on the countdown. I started the engine. I wasn't sticking around to watch the implosion. I didn't need to. Stratagem had built this spectacle on its own. I had simply stepped aside and let gravity do what it always does when arrogant men overestimate their power. By the time I reached the edge of downtown, my phone was lighting up like a cheap slot machine. Missed calls, message pings, group chat notifications. Stratagem was cracking at the seams, and the countdown still had 20 minutes left. I pulled into the garage of a cafe across from the company's rented event space, a glossy glass building they'd chosen to wow the visiting executives. Through the windows, I could already see the final preparations. Staff arranging seating, technicians checking projector lines, interns scrambling with clipboards like their lives depended on perfect symmetry. The irony made me smile. This obsession with appearances, with surfaces, with perception. They'd polish the world outside while the real world inside was seconds from collapse. I parked facing the entrance, opened my laptop again, and watched the Omega layer timeline shrink 001642, 001641. Then I switched my screen to the live operations feed, the one only the architect had access to. Rows and rows of bright green status indicators stretched across the display like a digital heartbeat. Then, just for a moment, everything flickered. Not an error, just the system recognizing the shift. The heartbeat slowed, streamlined, hardened, preparing. They had no idea. Inside, executives and clients were beginning to take their seats. These weren't small players. They were the backbone of America's supply chain, major retail distribution heads, long-haul freight executives, regional warehouse directors, even 2 tech CEOs who wanted to replace their failing networks with ours. They weren't here for a show. They were here because our system, my system, kept their multi-million-dollar operations from collapsing under pressure. And today, they were about to see what happened when the people behind the tech were treated like disposable parts. My phone buzzed again. A video call request. From Marcus. I answered with audio only. "Selena," he breathed, whispering like someone might be listening. "Whatever's happening, it's big." The interface started asking for your credentials. Then it locked out everyone above level 4. That was expected. Level 4 was midline monitoring, not command access. "It's doing what it's supposed to," I said. "Stay calm." "Martin's losing it," Marcus added. "He's shouting at Glenn, at IT, at anyone with a pulse. And Tessa's recording half of it. She's live streaming behind a pillar like she's at a concert." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she was. "Keep your distance," I said. "It's about to get worse." I ended the call and checked the countdown. 000950. Across the street, I watched the main projection screens blink on. Stratagem's logo, then the welcome message, then the promotional montage. The room dimmed as the demo prepared to launch. I could almost hear Martin's voice in my head. "Ladies and gentlemen, today you will witness the future of integrated logistics." Except today his voice cracked. I knew it before it happened, because the moment the system attempted to open the demo module, every screen went black, solid black. Then white text appeared, bold and unmistakable. "Architect credentials required. Please authenticate." A murmur rippled across the room. Confused whispers. Heads turning. Glenn rushed to the front console, typing like his fingers were on fire. Nothing changed. Another attempt. "Access denied. Credentials not found." Martin stepped forward, chest puffed, arms spread like he alone could force the system to obey. "Just a small hiccup," he said, loud enough for the guests to hear. He motioned frantically at the tech team, whispering harshly. But microphones are cruel things. They pick up desperation like perfume. "Fix it," he hissed. "Now." On the screen, a second message appeared. "Employment verification failed. System entering lockdown. Time remaining 0711. You could feel the shift. Confusion melting into irritation. Irritation hardening into something far more dangerous. Doubt. A logistics VP stood. "Is this part of the presentation?" Martin's smile wobbled. A security layer. Just routine. Nothing to worry about." Tessa in the corner kept filming. Her phone caught every twitch of panic, every crack in his voice. It wouldn't be long before her followers clipped the meltdown and flooded the internet with it. A trending disaster wrapped in designer shoes. The countdown continued, ticking loudly through the speaker system because someone, in their panic, had enabled audible notifications. 000419. "Why are we hearing a timer?" a distribution chief demanded. "Is this a joke?" "We should leave," someone else said. "This is unprofessional." Chairs scraped, people started standing, and then the coup de grace appeared across all 3 screens. Omega layer activated. System locked. For licensing inquiries, contact Marquez Innovations, LLC. A hush fell, sharp, stunned, disbelieving. Then a single man's voice. "Did the system just say another company owns this?" And just like that, the room imploded. People grabbed their things, executives stormed out, and the event Stratagem had spent 6 months planning dissolved in under 30 seconds. Across the street, sitting in my car, I watched Martin's empire collapse behind a wall of glass. He had fired me at 8:12 a.m. thinking he'd ended my influence. Instead, he'd handed me the perfect view of his downfall. I didn't stay to watch the executives spill out onto the sidewalk, but I saw enough to know Stratagem would be bleeding for months. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my seat, and let the weight of the morning settle over me. Not heavy, not crushing, just final. The kind of ending that feels like a locked door behind you, not an open wound. I drove 3 blocks east to the office of Elena Brooks, the attorney who'd helped me form Marquez Innovations years ago. She didn't look surprised when I walked in holding a coffee instead of a cardboard box. "It happened," I said simply. Elena nodded. "I saw the clip," she replied, sliding her laptop forward. "Tessa's livestream is everywhere. Half the comments think it's scripted. The other half think Stratagem is imploding." "They're not wrong," I said, sitting across from her. "Omega layer triggered cleanly. System followed every protocol." Elena pulled up a document, my original licensing agreement with Stratagem. "You're protected," she said. "The engine is yours. The optimization layer is yours. They violated the employment clause the second they terminated you without transfer procedures. It's airtight." For the first time in hours, I felt my shoulders ease. People underestimate the power of paperwork. They think strength comes from shouting or titles or corner offices. Sometimes it's a clause buried on page 7. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Martin's number. I declined, then again. Declined, then his assistant. Declined, then the board liaison. Declined. Elena raised an eyebrow. Persistent. "Desperate," I corrected. "The system isn't broken, it's just not theirs." She leaned forward. "So what do you want now?" That was the question, wasn't it? Revenge wasn't the point. It never had been. What I wanted was freedom. To work without fear, without being undermined, without having to babysit someone's entitled daughter while the backbone of the country's supply chain ran on code they couldn't even pronounce. As if conjured, a new email notification appeared on my screen. Subject line: Proposal from Atlas Meridian Group. Atlas Meridian, the largest competitor Stratagem had always been afraid of. I opened it, a meeting invitation, today, within the hour. I looked at Elena. She smiled. "Told you your work mattered." 30 minutes later, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the river, facing Atlas Meridian's chief strategist, a woman named Rowena Clark who carried the air of someone who'd fought twice as hard for half the recognition, but won anyway. "Selena," she said, "I won't waste your time. We've monitored Stratagem for a while. We want AegisLink's architect, the real one." She slid a folder toward me. Inside was an offer: salary, equity, full authority over a new infrastructure security division, and funding to rebuild AegisLink under my name, not as a footnote in someone else's empire. It was everything Stratagem promised, but never delivered. Everything I had earned. And this time, no one would fire me to make room for a girl with a ring light. "When can you start?" Rowena asked. I didn't need a countdown for this decision. "Tomorrow," I said. "Good," she replied. "Let's build something they can never touch again." The next morning, I stood behind the podium at Atlas Meridian's temporary launch hall, watching reporters, industry specialists, and analysts fill the room. No ring lights, no corporate buzzwords, no fragile egos pretending they understood the pulse of American logistics. Just people who wanted the truth. Rowena opened the event, her voice steady as she introduced the new division and the system we were preparing to build. Then she turned to me. "The floor is yours, Selena." I stepped forward, feeling the weight of eyes on me. Not judgment, not scrutiny, but expectation. The good kind, the earned kind. "Yesterday," I began, "my access to AegisLink was revoked without warning. Stratagem fired the architect responsible for the logic their business depends on. They treated a critical system like a marketing prop and were shocked when the foundation they ignored refused to hold their weight." Cameras clicked, pens scratched, no one blinked. AegisLink never failed. I continued. It followed the rules it was built with. When they removed the architect without a succession plan, it protected itself and the infrastructure it supported. Someone raised a hand. What happens to Stratagem now? That's up to them, I said, but the system won't return to anyone who treats engineering like decoration. Not anymore. Another question. And what happens next for you? I glanced at Rowena, then back at the crowd. We build something better, something honest, something that respects the people who create it and the people whose lives rely on it. This time, no shortcuts, no exploiting talent for optics. When the conference ended, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister. Dad saw you on TV. He said he's proud. That alone was enough. I walked out of the building feeling lighter than I had in years. Knowing Stratagem's collapse wasn't my downfall, it was my beginning. When I look back on everything that happened, the lesson that stays with me isn't about revenge or proving someone wrong. It's about knowing my worth before someone else tries to set the price. I spent years believing that hard work alone would protect me, that loyalty would be returned, and that competence would speak for itself. But the truth is far less comforting. In many workplaces, people will take everything you give until you have nothing left but exhaustion. They'll call you dedicated while quietly planning to replace you with someone cheaper or more convenient. What saved me wasn't anger. It was clarity. Walking out of Stratagem wasn't the end. It was the moment I realized I didn't owe anyone my silence or my compliance. I didn't need permission to defend what I built. And I didn't need validation from people who couldn't understand the value of my work, even if it hit them in the face. Some people say forgiveness is the path to peace, and maybe that's true. But sometimes the sharpest form of forgiveness is stepping away without giving them another second of your energy. Sometimes silence is the knife that cuts the cord clean. And if there was revenge in what happened, it was simple, measured, and fair. I let the consequences reach the person who created them. Life doesn't always give us perfect justice, but it does give us choices. The choice to walk, the choice to protect ourselves, the choice to start again on our terms. How to get started today. Write down what you bring to the table: skills, strengths, values. Identify one boundary you need to set at work. Take a small step toward a goal you've put off. Remind yourself that your time has value and act like it. If this story resonated with you, comment below, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more.